To the Constitutional Court that former President Jacob Zuma has rigged the state capture inquiry to protect himself and his cronies from any criminal liability. Regulation 8.2, in terms of the reference, published the Friday before Zuma stepped down, states that any facts or evidence that came to light during the inquiry are automatically inadmissible in any contemplated criminal cases. To unpack this more, we are joined by constitutional law expert Phephelaphi Dube, who's joining us from our Cape Town studios. We thank you very much for joining us this evening. Essentially, what happens to the court cases? Can Cyril Ramaphosa withdraw them without the consultation of former President Zuma?
Well, I think the important thing to be understood here is that in terms of the Constitution as well as the National Prosecuting Authority Act, the National Prosecuting Authority is really an independent organization which is supposed to be guided by the legislation and the Constitution and nothing else. So, of course, on that basis, President Cyril Ramaphosa wouldn't have any bearing, or rather he wouldn't be able to take any kind of decision that would be able to stand up before the courts with regard to the manner in which the National Prosecuting Authority conducts its work. So in a nutshell, he really wouldn't be able to instruct the National Prosecuting Authority on whether or not to withdraw certain cases.
With that being said, how would the withdrawal or non-withdrawal affect both parties and limitations thereof?
Well, we need to bear in mind that, just in terms of the National Prosecuting Authorities Act, as well as certain directives and policies that it has drawn up in order to guide the manner in which its prosecutors and the various heads of departments conduct their work. They obviously need to accept certain, in terms of, and this is what the Constitution says as well, that they are allowed to accept certain provisions from the parties that they are seeking to charge. So in this instance, we need to consider the fact that the president's legal representatives have already approached the National Prosecuting Authority with a view to explaining why the charges shouldn't be reinstated. And of course, the prosecuting authority will then weigh the kind of evidence that it has. It considers whether documents still exist. It considers whether indeed some of the witnesses are still alive, and if ever there are any extraditions that need to be carried out, etc. So it's really about balancing on the face of the evidence that's before it. It's really about balancing the question whether they think they could secure a current conviction, and if not, then chances are that the National Prosecuting Authority would go ahead with withdrawing a particular case.
Now, having a look at a bit of a broader view, the NPA of Advocate Shaun Abrahams, or under Advocate Shaun Abrahams, is seen as a cooperative with leadership of Jacob Zuma. What essentially can Cyril Ramaphosa do to ensure stability, as he mentioned during SONA?
Well, it's obviously a very tight rope that the president is walking in this regard, because the National Prosecuting Authority has to be seen to be independent. They have to be seen to be working in accordance with the law, so they can't be seen to be accepting instructions from the president. But of course, on the other hand, we need to bear in mind the decisions from the various courts. I think most importantly, the decision of the Pretoria High Court in Gauteng, which basically made it clear that any decisions that come out of the National Prosecuting Authority need to be done in a rational manner. So, of course, the question going forward is, what is the rational decision to be made going forward? What's really the best decision that would weigh the public interest on the one hand, and on the other hand, weigh what the law and the Constitution say?
Definitely. At the moment, since we cannot essentially divorce Zuma and the state capture inquiry, when we look at regulations published 2 weeks ago by the Justice Department, it shows that information likely to come out of the inquiry shall not be used for prosecution or criminal prosecution. Where does this put the inquiry's credibility going forward?
Well, I think on that particular point, there are two issues that need to be taken into consideration. So the one issue is that in terms of those regulations, it simply makes it harder for the National Prosecuting Authority to come up with its own evidence to go ahead and prosecute individuals who've been found of wrongdoing in terms of the Commission's own evidence. But of course, and then which is linked to the second point, the second point is really the question of whether it's a rational decision to have a commission of inquiry which is really a special fact-finding mission, and have this inquiry spend a lot of money, money which comes from the National Treasury, only to then turn around to say that any of this evidence that's gathered by this commission of inquiry can't be used to prosecute certain individuals. I think that regulation on its own is a regulation that's quite ready to be challenged before a court of law, because it ultimately serves to undermine the work of the Commission of Inquiry before the Commission of Inquiry has even started. So I think just looking at that regulation on its own, it's very much a regulation which probably wouldn't stand legal scrutiny if it was to be challenged before a court of law.
With that being said, would the regulation be amended under the new administration of Ramaphosa in order to actually make sure that the inquiry covers all critical aspects of capture and results in prosecution of those involved in the case?
Well, absolutely. If one considers the Commissions Act, and in terms of the Commissions Act, the power that's granted to the President. So, of course, we need to bear in mind that the President in this instance isn't just about a particular person, but it's really about the office of the President. So, despite the fact that there have been changes in the individuals occupying the President's office, it still comes down to the power that the individual within the office holds. So, bearing with that in mind, it's quite possible for the current president to amend the regulations within the regulations governing the Commission of Inquiry.
Still staying with the former president, Jacob Zuma, Minister Bongo's case of allegations to bribe the evidence leader in the parliamentary inquiry in the Eskom capture by the Guptas is still in the office of the president. Where does that leave Ramaphosa and his limitations and what he's able to do?
Well, I think linked to the idea of the president having the power to amend the regulations governing the state of the state of capture inquiry, I think in this instance it's just a question of President Ramaphosa applying his mind, and thereafter applying his mind, he makes a rational decision based on the information that's before him. So that decision doesn't rest or fall with the previous president. Again, it's really about the individual that's occupying that power. So it's just a question of President Ramaphosa reapplying his mind.
In layman's terms, what happens to all the bills that have been waiting for his signature before he leaves? Could Ramaphosa take them back to the National Assembly for amendments?
Absolutely, because in terms of the Constitution, this new president assumes all of the powers, functions, and responsibilities that come with the office. And some of those responsibilities include the manner in which he deals with bills that are bills that have been assented to before the National Assembly and are placed on his desk. So in that regard, he can either sign them into law, or if he's not happy with certain aspects of the bill, he can send them back to the National Assembly. For example, the expropriation bill, which was sent back on the basis that there was insufficient public consultation. So these are all of the options that are available to President Ramaphosa.
Thank you very much. That was constitutional law expert Phephelaphi Dube giving us a bit of a background as to what we can expect, as well as the laws and the amendments going forward around the state capture and the inquiry. Do stay tuned to SABC News. Myself and Francis will be back.